Good evening, everyone. On behalf of our leadership team, staff, board, entire community, welcome to the New England Aquarium Lecture Series. Tonight, we present A Legacy of the Ocean, exploring the past, present, and future of ocean protection and restoration with Philippe Cousteau. A couple of housekeeping items I just want to get out of the way first. Please silence your cell phones. A lot of checking going on. If you need to use the restroom during the presentation tonight, please go to the aisle right at the top of the stairs by the exit sign. Easiest way to access it. My name is Dr. John Mandelman. I am the Vice President and Chief Scientist of our Anderson Cabot Center for Ocean Life here at the aquarium. Founded in 2016, the center is the aquarium's dedicated ocean conservation science and practice institute. So it's an incredibly important part of our organization. Very proud to be part of this group and this staff, and many of whom are here tonight. I'm also thrilled tonight to share the moderating duties with my colleague, Tiffany Maccarelli, who leads the aquarium's youth development programs. Raise your hand, Tiffany. Thank you. Tiffany's going to be moderating or facilitating the Q&A at the tail end of this presentation. And together we are thrilled to welcome Philippe back to the New England Aquarium. 2010 is the last time you were here? Okay. We're lucky, and we're very lucky to call him a friend of our institution now for many years. We're also grateful to Lowell Institute for their generous support for this lecture. They've been supporting our lecture series. Many of you come to our lecture series as regulars. They've been supporting our lecture series for years. They allow us to give these lectures free of charge to the public, which we have deep level of gratitude. The aquarium is a nonprofit organization. We've been around for more than 50 years, 1969. We are dedicated to protecting and caring for ocean and marine animals, and we have been doing that for decades. Our speaker this evening shares our passion for protecting our ocean, our blue planet. Philippe Cousteau is an explorer, filmmaker, TV host, author, and social entrepreneur. He is the grandson of the legendary oceanographer Jacques-Yves Cousteau and acclaimed diver Simone Cousteau, and the son of pilot, diver, and cinematographer Philippe Cousteau Sr. and Jeanne Cousteau, with whom he co-founded EarthEcho International. EarthEcho International is building a global youth movement to restore and protect our ocean planet. To date, EarthEcho has activated over 2 million youth in 146 countries through its programs. Huge footprint. We have the pleasure of having two members of EarthEcho's Leadership Council here with us tonight, Chloe Wetzler and Sonok Yun. They will be joining, as they already are, Philippe on stage. A little bit more about Philippe. He's also CEO and co-founder, along with his wife, Ashlyn Cousteau, of Voyacy Ventures, an ocean-focused venture that is redefining 21st century environmental restoration, destination tourism, and storytelling. Philippe is the host and executive producer of the multi-Emmy nominated weekly syndicated series, Exploration Awesome Planet, now in its 7th season. As a special correspondent for CNN, Philippe has hosted several award-winning shows, including Going Green and Expedition Sumatra, and he hosted and produced Oceans for BBC and the Discovery Channel. Philippe is also an award-winning author of several books, including Follow the Moon Home, Going Blue, Make a Splash, and the book series, The Endangereds. He and his wife are co-authors of Oceans for Dummies. He serves on the National Council of the World Wildlife Fund, the board of Antarctica 2030, and the board of advisors of the Environmental Media Association, and holds an honorary doctorate in marine biology from the University of Plymouth in England. It is my great honor tonight to welcome one of the leading ocean champions of our time, Philippe Cousteau.
Well, good evening. I can't be asleep already. Good evening. All right. Very excited to be here. As you heard, it's been God 14 years. I can't believe it. So the last time I was at the aquarium, but it's a place that holds a very dear and special spot in my heart, and as does Boston. My journey in public speaking started in Boston, thanks to my dear friend George Buckley here, who invited me to speak at the Boston Sea Rovers. A long time ago now. It was a transformative experience for me. So always delighted to come back to this town. So as you heard, I want to talk a little bit about the past, present, and future of ocean conservation and crucially restoration. And I also am joined by two of our youth leaders, and they're going to come up here and talk a little bit about what they're doing, which is really, really exciting and inspirational. So it's going to be the three of us. So as George Burns liked to say, the key to a good speech is have a very good beginning and a good ending, and have both of them as close together as possible. So I will do my best to be brief and keep it flowing here for us all. I've got a couple little video clips and all sorts of fun stuff. So I wanted to start off with maybe a stroll down memory lane to remind ourselves the past, where it all started, and certainly literally for me. But for the world, our journey of exploring the ocean, which for most people is hard to imagine that it was literally just about a human lifetime ago that we began to explore beneath the surface of the ocean, when about 77 years ago, my grandfather first stepped into the Marne River outside of Paris to test this wacky contraption of a regulator attached to a tank of air to see if he could breathe underwater safely and swim freely like a fish. And of course, he did, and the rest is history. And he went on over the ensuing decades to pioneer any number of innovations of ocean exploration. And probably the most famous is underwater cinematography, where in 1968, he launched a program called The Undersea World of Jacques Cousteau, which went on for decades and exposed the world, literally, at a time when there were half a dozen or a dozen channels on television to the wonders of the ocean. So I thought maybe we would just take a minute to think back on that.
Each time we dive, each time we enter the sea, we learn something new. We have never been better equipped to observe, to learn, and to put our findings to scientific use. Over the years, our quests will lead us to confront the dangers and reveal the splendors of the sea.
So the opening credits. And, you know, a lot of people think of my grandfather as this man who was destined to explore the ocean, the godfather of the modern environmental movement, this extraordinary visionary and filmmaker and leader. But the true story is a little more nuanced, as they so often are. And I want to share that little piece of true history with you all. My grandfather actually started out as wanting to be a pilot in the French Navy. He wanted to go up, not down. And like most people in the world at the time, knew virtually nothing, nor did he care much about the ocean. It wasn't until a car accident where he broke his back driving on the windy roads of southern France that his dreams of flying were dashed. And for a year following that accident, he actually couldn't even walk. And so, in perhaps a very fortunate twist of fate, certainly for me, but I think for all of us, he was washed out of the Naval Aviation Program and told to swim in the Mediterranean to rebuild his strength, and was furnished with a pair of goggles and a homemade pair of fins by his captain, a man named Philippe Cousteau, whom my father and then I am named after. Incidentally, all the members of his graduating class of that Naval Aviation Program were killed in the early days of World War II. So for many reasons, we are all lucky that he had that car accident. But at the time, it was a devastating blow to his dreams. And when I think of my grandfather, I don't think of this man who is an ocean explorer and filmmaker at his core, and thus the core of what my father did and what I do, and my sister and my wife and our family, is focused on problem solving. He was a problem solver. He was told to swim in the Mediterranean, as I said, and began to be frustrated at the limitations of breath hold diving, the few minutes that he could hold his breath and swim, and his desire to be able to explore the ocean more freely. So he met an engineer, and determined to overcome this problem, they tinkered and they miniaturized and took an industrial valve and put it on the back of a tank, not knowing if it would work or if it would kill them or whatever. And scuba diving was born. Because prior to this, you have to remember, people's exploration of the ocean was limited to either breath hold diving, 2 or 3 minutes, or clomping around on the bottom with big copper helmets and lead boots and a hose that connected you to the surface, which was extraordinarily dangerous and costly and expensive and limited by depth. So they pioneered diving and then went on to really pioneer filmmaking, underwater cameras. And for my grandfather, it was really a journey of exploration. This concept of conservation was virtually unheard of in the 1930s and 40s. And it wasn't until my father here, Philippe Sr., got involved in that work in the 1960s, coming home from an expedition on some reefs in the south of France that he'd grown up diving, and seeing how just between the 1940s and the late 1940s and early 1960s, how much those reefs had declined in health. And he said to my grandfather, this is no longer about exploration. We are witnesses to this dramatic change in the health of the environment. And it had a profound effect on my father, seeing that change. And he said, our mission and our journey is no longer one of exploration. It is one of conservation. And they got ABC to sign on to 13 episodes of a risky venture foreseen at the time. Who would actually want to watch documentaries about the ocean? And of course, it was a global sensation for the next few decades, and it changed our relationship with the ocean. My father tragically was killed in an airplane accident in 1979, just 6 months before I was born. But I did get to know my grandfather, and he passed when I was 17. I think I'm 5 years old in this picture, and I show this picture a lot. It's one of my favorites, fond memories of times with him and learning from him, and always believing and recognizing what he told me, that the ocean is at the center of the conversation around the environment and human beings and our past, our present, and our future. And incidentally, I also say my mother hates me when I tell the story, but she used to cut my hair, and she denies it, but I'm sure that she just literally put a bowl on my head and cut around it. But my grandfather and my mother, as well, spent 13 years on expedition, had a very significant influence on me, talking about the importance of the ocean and all the challenges that it was facing. And I'm not going to go into that here. We all know the headlines. This is the present of the ocean is catastrophic. There's no other word. The ice caps are melting. 50% of the world's coral reefs have disappeared. 80% of the large pelagics have gone. Fisheries are collapsing. We are seeing sea level rise threatening coasts from Asia to Cape Cod. There's no question that we are in unprecedented times today. And the challenge that we face, be it from overfishing and and dying fish to climate change and coral bleaching, to plastic pollution, to other issues. I always like to include this photo up here. These are actually Somali pirates. And one of the challenges, I think the greatest challenge in present day that we face, is a lack of appreciation and true understanding for how important the ocean is. It continues to be a massive blind spot in the world, in our conversation about things like the climate crisis, about food security, about global security, about water scarcity. The ocean is at the center of all those things. And I like to include this photo because this for most people, it's kind of like spot the photo that doesn't belong. But in fact, the Somali piracy crisis, which has only re-entered I think the popular press and media recently because of the Houthis and firing of missiles into the Red Sea and disrupting what is an enormous amount of global commerce, and the emboldening of Somali pirates as a consequence of that has been in the headlines recently. But that story goes back actually to the 1990s. I'll take a second to share it with you. It's a story of greed and avarice and destruction, but not on the part of Somali pirates, on the part of Russia and China and the European Union. In the 1990s, Somalia was essentially a failed state and did not have the resources to police its waters. And so foreign fishing fleets would regularly and illegally enter into Somali territorial waters, waters that had supported the livelihoods of fishermen for millennia, to allow them to feed their children and their families, make a living, pulling out hundreds of millions of dollars worth of seafood a year illegally from these waters, with the governments of the EU and China and Russia turning a blind eye, as they so often do when it comes to the ocean and the destruction of the ocean. And so some of these fishermen, as they watched their livelihoods and their ability to feed their children disappear, turned to piracy. They turned to try and enforce the rules about their territorial waters and protect their heritage from these illegal fishing boats. We call it piracy. They would probably call it self-defense, ensuring the ability to feed their children. And they hijacked a few of those ships and were paid a ransom. And the light bulb went off. Non-state actors, as they call them, like Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb, Al-Shabaab, began to engage and arm these ex-fishermen with more sophisticated weaponry in return for a cut of the profits. And the Somali piracy crisis, which has cost trillions of dollars to the global economy in the last 25 years, 30 years, which has the fruits and the wealth that has generated has led to the deaths of thousands upon thousands and the displacement of hundreds of thousands of people in the Horn of Africa and now Central and North Africa, and has reached all the way here. And that is a failure of fisheries conservation. There's actually a Department of Defense study. They study this in the DoD, and as a failure of security. And the end of this study, and I'm paraphrasing, but it essentially says, for a few $1 million of fisheries conservation, all of this could have been avoided. Imagine. So the ocean is at the center of all of these issues. But I don't want to dwell on the present challenges. I want to focus on the future. A few years ago, I had the opportunity, Ashlyn, my wife and I had the opportunity to co-host a show for Discovery Channel called Nuclear Sharks. And it was an extraordinarily eye-opening experience for us and gave tremendous hope. And if there's anything that I want you all to walk away from tonight, it's hope. To walk away with hope and to recognize that there is amazing opportunity and that humanity has this terrible ability to destroy. We also have an astonishing and inspiring ability to rebuild. And the good news is that so does the ocean. The ocean also has an extraordinary power to renew and regenerate itself. And nowhere have I seen this more profoundly than in the Marshall Islands, in Bikini Atoll, that we filmed for this doc. So I'll show you a little clip of that.
Bikini Atoll, a remote South Pacific paradise, lost in time. Then, in 1946, this faraway coral atoll became a nuclear test site. Over the next 12 years, 23 atomic tests wiped out every living thing for miles around. 60 years later, Bikini is still radioactive.
Spiking up. I think
And
we should get out of here.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time here.
But life abounds in unexpected ways.
They're keyed in, they know that we're here.
The sharks are back.
Now!
But how is a mystery. Reef sharks don't migrate. So where do they come from? And how did they get here?
Right now we have about a jump of the shark feeding.
Ashlyn and Philippe Cousteau
You guys ready?
Yeah, man, let's do it.
are on an expedition to solve the mystery of Bikini's nuclear sharks.
So as you saw, I'm actually going to free myself from the podium here. As you saw in the 1950s, we literally threw the worst fire and brimstone that humanity can engineer at these islands, killing everything above and below the surface. But because of the radiation, which is diluted in the water that was safe to dive, but as you saw with the Geiger going, we couldn't spend, we didn't have kids yet. We were like, we're going to spend a long time here. So we didn't on land. But what we saw was awe-inspiring, jaw-dropping experience, because as you saw, the sharks were so abundant. And if the sharks, as this apex predator, are abundant, that means that the ecosystem upon which they rely is also abundant. And it was. In just 60 years of this area being a de facto marine protected area, nature in the ocean had bounced back spectacularly. And I've seen this since subsequently, with my eyes open and attuned to it now, all over the world. And so the good news is that we have tools in our tool belt, like MPAs, to passively allow nature to restore, hence 30 by 30, the global campaign to protect 30% of the ocean by 2030. The importance of which cannot be overstated. The idea that we can work hand in hand with nature and it can renew and rebuild itself is an exciting one. And that, in my opinion, is the future of the ocean and of conservation, and not of sustainability. We need to get rid of that term. Sustainability needs to go bye-bye. We don't want to sustain the way the world is today. We want to rebuild, and we can. That's what's exciting. About 25 years ago, I worked with Dr. David Vaughan, some of you may know of him, on a project to actually see if we could grow corals in greenhouses in captivity to replant onto damaged reefs as a method of active restoration. We were the first to do this and pioneer this work, and it's gone on to be something that happens all over the world now. And we are now taking that technology to a scale unimagined before, where we are building plans to build in kilometers of wild reefs and restore and renew, not just restore, but actually build reefs where there used to be reefs, but are no longer. And so utilizing technology, I'm going to play this little clip here to give you a sense of what that is, and innovation again to actively renew and restore nature is also, I think, one of the most exciting frontiers of the ocean and conservation movement.
Hi, I'm Dr. Dave Vaughan, Chief Scientist for Buoyancy Ventures, and welcome to my nursery. So I started growing algae, and then I learned to grow corals for the aquarium trade. And it was actually Philippe and Alexandra Cousteau. They said, why aren't you doing this for the ocean instead of the pet store? And the rest has been history. So you ready to make some corals?
I am. I'm very excited.
So here we go on. I named it microfragmentation because people in big corals fragment by hand. we now cut them into very tiny pieces, and it stimulates them to grow very fast. So this coral would have taken 2 to 3 years to grow to this size.
2 to 3 years for that?
Yes, but here we will cut this into 20 pieces. Each piece will grow back to that size in less than 6 months.
Wow.
And if we have 100,000, we cut them into just 10 pieces each, we can get to 1 million next year. And it's going to be used for the...
So that's really what excites me, and one of the things that I wanted to share tonight as we move towards speaking to the most extraordinary young people that I know, and share what they're doing, because innovation and technology presents a really exciting opportunity to renew and rebuild the ocean. And that's where we need to go. We need to be recognized, and then we can work hand in hand with the ocean, hand in hand with nature, to help restore and renew and make the world better for the next generation. So finally, I want to talk a little bit about the other piece of the work that we do, which is focused on youth. 17 years ago, I founded EarthEcho International, co-founded with my mother and my sister, always remembering what my grandfather spoke about, which was the importance of building a society and a constituency in society that cares about these issues. And that if we're going to build durability for conservation, we're going to build the kind of public will to create the political and economic changes that are necessary to create the kind of world that we want, we have to focus on education, which unfortunately has been underinvested in by the environmental movement historically. And so EarthEcho is an organization that has, as you heard, worked with millions of young people around the world in over 140 countries for 17 years now, and has helped be one of the pioneering voices in growing the ocean education and youth leadership movement. And the fruits of our and other organizations like ours, I think labor was prominently displayed politically at the last presidential election, which it's a shame that environment and climate is a polarizing political issue, though less so with the younger generation. But young people turned out in swing states and voted, tipped the election towards Biden because of climate and social justice issues. And so we're already seeing young people and the impact that they have on society and how they're embracing these issues. And that is another cause for hope. And why, one of the things I want to say, usually whenever I do events like this, I have to convince, cajole, insist to the venue to allow me to have some of our youth leaders join me. When the New England Aquarium reached out to me, he said, "We'd like you to come and speak, and can you bring some of your youth leaders?" And I was like, hell yeah. So again, thank you to the aquarium that recognizes the importance of this, of course, so much. So I want to switch over here, and then I'll come back, and then we're going to have a conversation. But I want you to hear from two really extraordinary young leaders, because one of the challenges that we face today is that we tend to pigeonhole young people into some pretty narrow silos. We tend to think, and there's nothing wrong with beach cleanups, but that kids can do a beach cleanup or sell some cookies, and that's about it. And what we've seen as a youth-led organization is young people passing laws, young people starting businesses, young people using technology, amazing things all over the world that is truly transformational. And the impact that young people then have on the adults in their communities is also transformational. I've never met an adult that came up to me and was like, I didn't believe in climate change, but I saw a 30-second public service announcement, and that really changed my worldview. That's never happened, ever. But I have a lot of people come up to me and say, I don't know about the climate thing, but boy, my kids are making us do this and that, and they come home and we're nagging me about the food and the energy and the this and plastics. And so the power that youth have today as leaders and tomorrow is really another source of hope for me, and I hope for you, as you'll see here. First with Chloe Wetzler. She is a member of the EarthEcho Youth Leadership Council, and she is pursuing a dual degree at Duke, at the Nicholas School of the Environment at Duke University in marine policy. And something I learned today about Chloe is that most people, we fostered a dog. We have friends that have fostered cats and things like that. Chloe fostered oysters, which is pretty cool. She'll tell you about that. But please, Chloe, come on up here.
Hello. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey as an ocean advocate and how EarthEcho has shaped that. So I am from Virginia Beach, Virginia. I grew up spending most of my time outside and on the water, and it's kind of impossible not to fall in love with the ocean and marine life when you do that. So I would go to sea camps over the summer, and I started volunteering at my local aquarium, which was the Virginia Aquarium, and the fascination with marine life and oceans just really grew from there. And then in school, I would learn about climate change and sea level rise and coral bleaching. And as someone who's from a coastal community, that really scared me. And I knew that I wanted to be part of the solution. And I really saw science as the best way to do that. So I was trying to get as involved as I could. In my senior year of high school, my AP environmental science teacher heard about something called EarthEcho, told me about it, encouraged me to apply. So in my first year at the University of Virginia, I became a water challenge ambassador for EarthEcho. And at UVA, I was studying biology and environmental science. I was really excited to get involved. I joined a coastal ecology lab, and I spent a summer doing hands-on oyster restoration with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, which is what this picture is from. And going into this, I thought this was going to be my absolute dream job because oysters are one of my favorite species. They're a keystone species. They do so many cool things, but I can't get sidetracked on oysters because that's all I will talk about. But I was doing really cool work in the field. In this picture, we were planting oysters onto restoration sites throughout the Lynnhaven and Elizabeth River, and we were doing community outreach events. But by the end of the summer, I was kind of getting overwhelmed by a sense of I'm on a team with so many incredibly hardworking people, and we're pouring so many resources and time into restoring just one watershed. And I've been taking climate science classes and environmental justice classes, and I understood that the problems we were going to be facing were much more extensive, and it wasn't going to be enough without some other sort of systemic, larger scale change. So while I was kind of feeling like this, it was summer, and as part of EarthEcho, we have a youth leadership summit every summer where we get really cool guest speakers coming to talk to us, and we have advocacy trainings. So I was learning about what is a notice and comment period? What's the Federal Register? What should you do if there's a policy issue related to the ocean and climate? How do you contact your representative? What can you say? We got all sorts of resources on those sorts of things. And then we had guest speakers from federal agencies and nonprofits who were advocates. And I was just kind of realizing through that this work was really cool and inspirational. So when I was a senior at UVA, I started taking more policy classes, and I applied to grad school, which is where I am now at Duke. I'm doing, as Philippe noted, the dual degree with law, but also environmental management, where I'm focusing on marine policy. And since being at Duke, I have become the symposium coordinator for the Ocean Policy Working Group. So I just hosted a symposium all about the high seas. So that's areas and biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, which is something that it's kind of like a newer emerging topic, the High Seas Treaty, deep seabed mining. And because they're newer, we don't have classes yet on them and are offered at Duke. So that was a really cool student event. And then I started doing permitting research for Duke's Nicholas Institute of the Environment. And I know that most of you are probably thinking permitting research doesn't sound all that exciting. But for me, it's a really cool full circle moment because I'm doing research into the permitting and regulatory challenges that are preventing the scaling up of coastal nature-based solutions like living shorelines. And just in case anyone is not totally familiar with a living shoreline, that usually entails planting marsh grass behind a hardened sill, so either oyster reefs, oyster castles, or rock. And through this project, I've been interviewing different restoration workers and state regulatory staff to look at how we can make it easier for environmental groups to install these restoration projects on the ground, which is really exciting because that should help speed up restoration projects and allow for some of these larger scale changes that I was looking for. Another thing that we get to do with EarthEcho is attend some really cool policy events. So I got to attend the Conservation and Action Summit in Washington, D.C. I got to go to the White House Building Climate Resilient Communities Summit in DC as well. And as a young professional, so I just started grad school. I graduated from undergrad in May. It can be really intimidating to come to spaces and meetings and conferences where, as a full-time student, I don't have the same experience and expertise as everyone else in the room. But EarthEcho has really showed me that our voices and our perspectives are still incredibly important and valuable. And so it's given me the confidence to kind of approach these sorts of situations with a professional attitude and knowing that my voice is important. It's been really valuable to get to see what sorts of, what goes into making these important federal policy decisions, who are the stakeholders. And it really opened my eyes to the world of marine policy. I didn't know that that was an option. As I was growing up, I really saw science and science only as a way to make change for the environment. And now I am really excited by the potential for my future career. I know that it's going to be a tough path forward, but armed with what I've learned from EarthEcho and that even as a full-time student, I can be a successful advocate for the ocean. I'm really excited for everything that's going to come. And I'm also constantly inspired by my peers at EarthEcho. We have a really great cohort of youth leaders. I'm now on the Youth Leadership Council. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Education and Outreach Committee. And it's just really great to see that I went from science into policy and permitting research. Other people are doing technology. Everyone is doing so many cool things. But just because you're a full-time student doesn't mean that you can't also be the successful advocate for a safe and healthy planet and environment and ocean. So I would like to turn it over to Sonok.
Real quick. Chloe is a great example of the power that young people have when we tap into it and we enable and empower and give them the tools and knowledge. And it is truly, as I said, something that amidst all the bad news that exists in the world, what I see as the future of the environmental movement is one focused on how we all come together. My grandfather, the past, was really about exploration. My father, the next generation, was focused on conservation. But when I look to the future and I think about where we're going and where we need to go, it's really of participation, of all of us coming together, not expecting some savior to come and fix it for us, but recognizing that we're all part of this and that no matter what we're passionate about, and this is what I'm constantly amazed by the young people we work with, it's not just pursuing science and it's pursuing, as I said, policy. It's starting successful businesses in the blue economy, entrepreneurship. It's broadening the scope of what it means to be an ocean citizen and a citizen, period, on this planet. Sonok Yun is also one of our youth leaders. He's a member of the Youth Leadership Council, and he's the founder of Environmental Droners. He's the creator of the Litter Locator app. Now he's based in Washington, D.C., but he's from North Carolina. And amidst all the other things that he does, he's also, I just learned this, a captain of 2 varsity teams, rowing and tennis, amidst everything else that he does. So I wanted Sonok to come up and share a little bit about his work with you all as well. Another perspective on the potential and the power of young people.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sonok Yun. I am 16 years old, and I'm a junior at Episcopal High School, which is located right outside of DC in Alexandria, Virginia. And my story kind of starts in 7th grade, which is when I always had a passion to make a difference in my community. And I always had these ideas, but going into 8th grade, they really grew. And I really wanted to do something with technology and the environment because they're both two things that I really cared about. And so I was thinking about like creating robots that would like clean trash in rivers by themselves. But then eventually I really wanted to use drones in some way to help the environment. And then I was with my mentor, and then I was telling him about my ideas and how I wanted to create an organization that uses drones to help the environment. And he asked me, why do I want to do this? He said, you could do it for college, you can do it for scholarships, you can do it for recognition. But even though he said all those options, I said, no, that's not why I want to do it. The real reason I really wanted to create this organization was because I wanted to be involved within my community. And I feel like that mindset has still continued to motivate me and drive me to the person I am today. And with this idea of using drones to help the environment, I entered EarthEcho's Our Echo Challenge. And then in there, I placed top 10 in the nation. And I placed top 10 in the nation, where I also received the People's Choice Awards. And after receiving the People's Choice Awards, I had a newfound motivation to really create this organization. But again, as an eighth grader, I was scared. I didn't know really what I was doing. But the thing I kept saying to myself, and what my parents and my dad, who's also in the stands, were saying, was he said, why not? So I decided to just start this organization. And first, we started using drones to film highly polluted areas within our community. And with the footage, we posted on social media, we went to government officials, and our main goal was to raise awareness. And then after we did this, we know that the first step of solving a problem is first identifying it. And I'm glad with drones, we were able to identify the trash that was in our communities. But then we really wanted to make another difference. And that's when we started to do cleanups. And we started partnering with organizations from East Carolina University. And then we started creating cleanups, hosting with a lot of businesses and local restaurants. And now to this day, we host one of the biggest cleanups in North Carolina. And we have collected over 5 tons of trash. And that's just from cleanups alone. And also, just like Mr. Philippe Cousteau said, a lot of people think that youth can only do cleanups and all of that. And of course, it's good. Of course, it's great work if you are hosting cleanups, but I wanted to do more. And that's why I partnered with East Carolina University to create an app called the Litter Locator, which is known as the solution to pollution. And basically, it's an app where citizens all over the globe can document litter, and it's a huge database full of trash points from multiple different countries, and it's designed to help properly document instances of litter across our precious communities. And this was created through a 9-month process. So it was a really long process, but we were able to create an app and get it rolling. And it was really a huge step in the right direction, because not only were we able to affect our local community, but we were also able to affect our international community. And then now that we were in this international realm, I knew that different communities have different issues. While my community's biggest issue might be pollution, I know that other people have different social justice issues, such as communities going through wars or floods or anything like that. So then I started teaching students from 7 different countries, which included locations in Greenville, North Carolina, Wilson, North Carolina, Washington, D.C., Alexandria, Virginia, Spain, South Korea, Ukraine, Uganda, Afghanistan, and Cameroon. And I started teaching these students, and I taught them how to pursue their passions and become youth leaders in their communities. Because growing up, I had opportunities like EarthEcho to pursue my passions and to grow my ideas. And I also wanted to be an outlet for other youth. So I started teaching them, and now I've helped grow over 5 different organizations all over the world through mentoring them. And as you can see in one of the photos, I was able to go to South Korea this summer and actually meet the person that I was doing it with, because we do virtual lessons. And I was able to give them a drone. We were able to create chapter organizations too, and 4 different locations. And now they also have drones. They film, they raise awareness, they host cleanups. And it's this huge process. And then even through that, I still wanted to do more. So then we started hosting summer camps for underprivileged youth, focusing on physical well-being, health, nutrition. And also we started teaching students how to fly drones. And we donated over 50 drones to a summer camp in Wilson. And we taught them how to fly drones. We gave kids certificates after they figured out how to fly them. And it was just a huge opportunity where I was able to give back to people who don't really have much, because I know that there's so much power lying with youth and we need to foster it. And that's why I started teaching these students. That's why I was hosting these summer camps. And that's why I continue to do it to this day. And then as I was accepted into the EarthEcho's Youth Leadership Council, I was met with so many different youth that I was able to engage with. And I realized that there's so much power in youth in today's world that goes unnoticed. And even through Bow Seats Future Blue Youth Council, I was able to meet so many different people with so many different ideas. I was able to mentor so many new people. And it was such an amazing experience. And then growing into this school year as a junior, I really wanted to get into political advocacy. And I told Sean Russell of EarthEcho, I told him that I want to get into political advocacy. Can you please help me? And since then, I went to the White House a month after I told him. I went to the White House. I saw the president and the prime minister of Australia. And then a few months later, I was there talking with senators and congressmen and representatives from the White House all over the globe. And I was able to talk with them. And even though I was the youngest one there by like 30 years, it was still like really fun. And as a kid, I was always intimidated by like all these adults, but I got used to it. So even when I was there, I was able to use my voice for the better. And then, as you can see, there's President Biden actually sent me a letter a few weeks ago thanking me for the work I do. And he said, when youth talk, adults listen. And I feel like that's a big thing that I've carried on throughout my journey. And it's just the fact that, yes, we will always be overlooked, but I hope that's not the future, because youth have really important things to say and really important opinions. And obviously they can do really big things, just seen at the council and different councils from across the globe. And then to all the adults out here, I just wanted to say that it is important to support youth, to invest in youth, and to believe in youth, because I know that a lot of people might think that they're not smart enough for it, they're not mature enough for it, but obviously they are, and they can do these great things. And to all the youth out there, I just wanted to say this phrase that I live by, and it's, life's too short to worry, but long enough to live, laugh, and love. And I feel like Philippe can also justify for this, but another one that I had was that a day that we waste today is the same day that somebody who died yesterday would have wished for. And it's really important that we use every single day to help the world, because we should be grateful that we're here on this planet, and we should be grateful that we have opportunities like this. And I really hope that the future is bright ahead of us. Thank you.
Thanks, buddy. That's great. Just two, albeit amazing, examples of the young people we work with and the future of the ocean. And as you can see, the future is bright. Now, I will say that does not mean as adults we can abdicate our responsibility to build and actively engage in right now also building a better world. But I can say that the future of the environment of the ocean for me is one of focusing on education, innovation, and technology, and embracing the natural power that the ocean has to renew itself, because we cannot solve the climate and biodiversity crisis we face in this world today without restoring and protecting the ocean. So thank you. I think we're going to jump into a conversation here now with Tiffany, and we do have one extra here.
All right, thank you so much, Philippe, Chloe, and Sonok. That was wonderful. Hi, everyone. I'm Tiffany Maccarelli, Manager of Youth Development here at the New England Aquarium. We have a teen internship program that focuses on workforce development here. We also have our signature youth climate advocacy program called Climateens. And the Climateens and I, along with Mass Audubon's youth climate leaders, had the pleasure of spending some time with Chloe and Sonok earlier today. So very grateful to be here. Climateens and I were also in Washington, D.C. last year with some of EarthEcho's other youth leaders. So it's really wonderful to be here crossing paths again. And with that, let's jump into the Q&A. We will be getting some questions from our virtual audience, so I'll just be checking those on my phone as they come in, and then we'll also be fielding questions from our in-person audience. So let's dive right in. We'll start with our in-person audience. Where's our first question? All right, right up there in purple. Great, and I'll just repeat the questions for our virtual audience. First one is, where do you see zoos and aquariums in the conversation of advocacy for our oceans?
I can go. I would say, at least for me, the aquarium was a huge part of my childhood, and if it wasn't for my awe and wonder for marine life, I wouldn't be as invested in trying to make sure that that biodiversity is protected. So even though it might not be as direct as a link, it definitely was necessary for me to kind of inspire that movement. But then also a lot of aquariums, like the New England Aquarium, have climateens and programs for youth that show them how to become an advocate. And like I was kind of alluding to earlier, I didn't really know that it was an option to make a comment on the Federal Register or talk to NOAA, or I didn't realize that that was even a possibility as a young person. So it's programs like this for young people, I think, really open the path to becoming an advocate.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to add that I think that for the evolution of youth engagement is really important. And you look, in some places do it better than others. Certainly the New England Aquarium is a great example of recognizing that it is not enough to just be a passive place for observation, but it is really critical to engage young people, give tools, give knowledge, provide opportunities for them to be leaders, to have a voice, and it takes work. And so aquariums have a tremendous opportunity as a central destination in a community to do that. And I think that does dovetail nicely into the second question.
Yeah, so second part of that was, how do we foster diversity in the ocean advocacy movement?
Yeah, that is a great question, and it takes real thought and intention and intentionality to do that. There are a lot of historically neglected communities. We've worked with many of them in coastal places from Florida to Los Angeles, who live within a mile of the ocean and have never been to the beach. And so specifically and intentionally reaching out and engaging those communities, everything from language, offering your content in different languages, things like Spanish, which we do, and very specifically looking for community-based organizations that serve those youth and building partnerships and trust, and providing opportunities to get them engaged and providing resources and understanding what resources are necessary. Sometimes that's grants, sometimes that's teacher stipends, things like that might not be necessary for certain communities, are necessary for others. And so just listening and being willing to approach those conversations with humility. The key here is that it is not only the right thing to do because it is the right thing to do, but it is also a very smart thing to do. We need a broad and diverse spectrum of society. We're all in this together to care and, again, make those political and economic choices that drive the kind of outcomes that we want. So thank you for that question. It's a really important one. And EarthEcho invests a lot of time, and we've got some terrific sponsors that have supported our work to reach out to those communities. I don't know. So Chloe, anything to add?
I would just say Sonok and I have both worked with a school in Wilson, North Carolina called The Spot. And Wilson, North Carolina is not on the coast. And it has just been really cool because I grew up in Virginia Beach. So when I was doing outreach stuff at the Virginia Aquarium, a lot of people had just more familiarity with the ocean and issues facing the ocean. And then when we go to places that are landlocked and don't, like a lot of the kids had not been to the ocean, they'd been swimming in the river, but just getting to go to them and to present about ocean issues was really cool because we were kind of opening their minds to these ideas. And a lot of people who haven't been involved in these spaces before, it might be because they didn't even know that was an option or an opportunity, and starting them young has been, I think, really rewarding to see. And yeah.
I agree. And then just, I feel like it's really exposing youth to these opportunities and different things that a lot of youth aren't exposed to today. And then like through like teaching these youth from all of these different countries, I realized that a lot of them don't really know about certain issues or aren't really educated about these certain topics. And I feel like that was kind of like an eye-opener and actually noticing how much help is needed for all youth around the world. And I feel like it's just important to kind of like diversify the type of people that we target and like kind of show them what life is like in other places. And I feel like it's really important to get those youth engaged at an early age.
Thank you. All right, let's take another question from our audience right here. All right, so this question is, do you think that the ocean has the ability to rebound from all issues, like the one you mentioned earlier about the Marshall Islands, or do you think it needs more help?
Well, you mentioned specifically plastic. So the ocean has this extraordinary ability to renew itself. Once the radiation had diluted in Bikini, it was able to be relatively untouched and do what it needed to do. So yes, in many cases, the ocean is extraordinarily resilient. You mentioned plastics. That is an unknown. Because for the ocean to renew and regenerate, you have to remove the anthropogenic human-caused impacts, right? And so oftentimes that'll be, okay, stop dumping sewage in the water or chemical pollutants or fertilizers or whatever it may be, radiation. And in so doing, really extraordinary things can happen. Plastics are insidious micro and nanoplastics, and they don't go away. So while I do believe that the ocean can adapt, it is to be TBD in terms of really the long-term impacts of plastics. We don't know, and it's very scary because they don't go away. Although we are finding some organisms that are able to metabolize plastics, which is amazing. and unexpected, from tiny worms to some microbes in the ocean, in fact. So, you know, that story isn't written yet. But when you are able to remove the human pressures, anthropogenic pressures, overfishing, pollution, whatever it is, then assuming that you have some sort of a baseline of life still, at least regionally, really cool things can happen. It can take time, decades, or in some cases maybe centuries, but that's where active restoration comes into play, where you can grow corals, and in fact you can specify and favor heat tolerant corals that you can then grow and accelerate in captivity at 10, 20x growth rates, and replant onto those reefs to accelerate that restoration, or to replant mangroves, or to plant oyster reefs to seed that restoration and accelerate it. So you can do that, which is really exciting too. But the plastics issue is one that if it doesn't scare you, you're not paying attention. And it is insidious, terrifying, and one that has a huge influence and impact on human beings as well, that we still don't even understand in our health, because where a lot of that plastic in the ocean, where does it go? Into the seafood, into the food, the fish. And then where does that go? Into us. I don't eat seafood, but into you, if you do. And it's really scary. So unfortunately, no one has the answer to that yet. But
all right, wonderful, thank you. Our climate teens are doing a project on microplastics in the ocean, so very, very timely for our group right now. All right, we have a question from the virtual audience. Empowering youth in the conservation realm is so powerful. What can we older folks do to help this endeavor amongst our older selves and to re-engage the ones who watched Philippe's grandfather in awe in the 1960s?
I think, for us, it's about approaching young people with humility as well, because in the past, there's this very adult-centric, top-down approach to education that is ironic. We mucked it up, and now we still think we have all the answers to fix it, and we don't. And so approaching youth with much more, what we advocate is a youth-led approach, where you're really giving tools and listening to young people and giving them the platforms to actually impact and to pursue impact in a way that is relevant to them. It's not just about being a marine biologist, as Chloe said. We have programs around youth entrepreneurship and the blue economy, programs around technology, programs around policy. It's amazing what can happen. So instead of thinking it from a top-down approach and adult-directed, think of it as a bottom-up and a youth-directed approach, and give them the latitude and the space to do amazing things, and they will. So I would say it's very hard for adults. Be humble. We don't have the answers, and embrace the power that young people have to innovate and change the world.
Thank you. We'll take another virtual audience question. So how do we take grassroots ocean environmental campaigns that work to convert talk into action and then bring them to the state or federal level? How can we support that?
Yeah. I would say talking to your representatives. That's a very simple answer, but most state legislators and elected officials like to hear about these sorts of projects, and grassroots, locally led, community-based projects, because those are the ones that the community knows what it wants, and a lot of times state governments can kind of get some backlash if they just go in and tell a community, oh, we should do this restoration project. So having a movement come out of the community is actually something that government officials really like to see, because they have funding, they have grants that they can apply for to help support these. So the more communication and building a media platform around those, I think are really important to help kind of match the project design and the people with the people who have the resources and the funding to get those projects implemented.
Yeah, and then I think one thing that really surprised me going into the political advocacy work was how easy it is to talk to your state representative. Like, you can go online, Google their website, and then just submit this little form, and you can book a meeting with them like really shortly. And like through that, I've talked with like 7 different other people, and just being able to directly talk with the people that make the change is something that's really important. And just making that action, just making that step of committing to like talking with them is really important. And it's a lot easier than you think it is.
Yeah, and I think it's really important too, particularly in this climate right now, while there's a place for protest. One of the challenges that we have in a society that is so focused on instant gratification is thinking that change comes really, really quickly. And it doesn't. And in many ways, it doesn't because it's built that way, right? Change should take some time. Otherwise, we'd be all over the bloody place. And so it's about having patience and engaging with the system from a perspective of patience and perseverance and tenacity, and helping young people understand that is really important. And also understanding and embracing that as adults too, and recognizing it's not, it's everything isn't in 30 seconds. And that's been a big part of our work at EarthEcho, is helping young people recognize that fact. And then what are the steps, and how can you have that impact? How do you engage in the system and create really systemic impact? There is performative impact, which is very popular in society today, and limited impact, which is, I made a poster, or I did a protest, or I did something like that, and I posted myself on Instagram, and don't I feel great about it? And then there is real systemic impact, and that takes effort and time. But as you just heard, it's possible and it's accessible, and so giving young people that confidence, providing them platforms, and study communications. That's my number one thing that I always tell people. It's a big part of our training at EarthEcho. No matter what you want to do, no matter what the youth in your life is interested in, make sure that they study communications, how to tell a story, how to get up in front of people, how to tell ideas, how to inspire people, how to be confident and believe in yourself. And communications is a critical tool there. Storytelling is the language of learning. And so no matter what you're interested in, embrace communications and those tools, and you'll get a lot further.
Thank you. All right, we have time for one more in-person question, so we'll go right up here.
It would.
somewhat responsible that the benefit from the way this planet is, right? So I like to apologize to the young people with what we've left them with, because we're not going to be around for another 30, 40 years to see how it comes out, but that's certainly on you guys. So good to know that you're there and you're making it happen. And my question is, how do you get more people, more diversity involved? How do you tell that story and get it out? So I'm not here by happenstance. Boston is right on the water. We have marshes all along the coast. And there needs to be more people involved in being aware of what's happening. Not just looking at it as dirty water, grass, birds.
Thank you. Yeah, so this question is, how do we get more people involved in the community level? How do we get more diversity, more people from Boston specifically, to know what's going on and to be an understanding of what's happening?
I guess I would say, well, first, in response to your comment that it's not too late, and even if you guys or your generation is responsible for the climate crisis, like we can still take action now, and you can still support policies that are going to be good for renewable energy and restorative ocean projects. So it's not too late to take action. And then I think institutions like the New England Aquarium, any sort of environmental nonprofit, the Climate Teens, Mass Audubon, just education and outreach, I think, is so important, because when you reach one person, then that person's going to tell their friends. And something I hadn't mentioned earlier was utilizing your network. Part of what we do with EarthEcho is we have an online platform called Gen C, and we communicate with each other. So we're not in the same state, but if I'm working on a project in Virginia or North Carolina, I can get advice from my friends in California who have worked on similar projects. So using your network to kind of share ideas, because really you have to impact one person who will then impact all of their peers. So I think definitely with just communication, utilizing your network, and more outreach, it is definitely possible.
And then I think something that I've personally experienced is creating a standard where youth don't have to get involved, but they want to get involved. And I feel like that's kind of the reason I chose technology, was because a lot of people, youth these days, are really involved in technology and really interested. So like combining two things, that one is an issue, but one is a way to solve it, and combining it so that youth can actually enjoy it and something like that is really important. But also, my organization was built on education and that factor of like making sure that everyone knows the issue. And I feel like the biggest thing that helped was just kind of making it fun and making it engaging and making it so that people want to help. And I feel like through social media, through creating videos, and through creating different types of like media is really important to support like youth now, like these days.
Yeah, I have to stand up. Absolutely. We need a tonal shift in the conversation. For far too long, the environmental movement has been one of doom and gloom, of depravity, or deprivation, perhaps a better term, about you're bad, stop doing this is bad. There's a lot of choices today. There were 7 channels when my grandfather had his show. You kind of stuck, right, on what you could watch. So you had a captive audience. That's not the case anymore. But the way we talk about these issues are not inclusive and engaging. They're not hopeful. They're not optimistic. They're not fun. So people tend to change the channel. I don't want to sit here and learn about how things are dying. That's the narrative of the ocean. It's the obituary of the ocean. That's all we hear about. We need to talk about the hope and the opportunity. We need to stop talking about polar bears as the poster child of climate change and start talking about children as the face of climate change. We care about children. I'm sorry, not enough people care about polar bears to change their behavior for polar bears. We need to stop thinking about this as a problem and start thinking about it as an opportunity, and how we can build jobs, and how we can help people feed their families, and how we can restore nature, and how nature can restore itself, and how we can invest in technology and embrace hope. People want to be part of a winning team. They want to be part of hope. They want to be part of optimism. People don't want to be part of doom and gloom and depression and things are dying. They will just change the channel. So we need a tonal shift. We need to think differently and embrace the fun. And then we need to think about how we use our networks and how we leverage new technologies to tell stories in engaging and fun ways that are relevant to people, where they are, who they are. The environmental movement ignores so often the first rule of communications. Know your audience and speak to what your audience cares about. We talk about what we care about. We need to talk about what audiences care about, and that's so important. So I hope you join us on a journey of hope and optimism. Yes, there are a lot of problems. We don't want to gloss over that. We need to acknowledge that. But we also need to remember that in this era of doom scrolling nonsense, that we embrace hope and we recognize that there is opportunity, that we can build a better world together. when we come together and operate with that mindset, then I think we can get more people involved and more people engaged in what we're all doing on this journey together. So anyway, that'll be my point.
Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you again to Philippe, Chloe, and Sonok for joining us tonight. We're very grateful to you for being here, for sharing your vision, your leadership, and your work to promote ocean conservation. So thank you.
Thank you to the aquarium and to all of you for being on the front lines for all of this work, and to you both. Thank you.
And I just want to say tonight's event was made possible through generous support from Lowell Institute. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. Good night.